I want everyone to reminisce on the first time that they learned how to ride a bike. Chances are, when you learned how to ride a bike for the first time, there was someone standing from afar. But no, they weren't the ones who actually rode the bike for you. You still had to do that yourself. But they were there in case you stumbled. And if you did stumble, they made you get right back up, put you back on that seat, and made you pedal again. This is what any teacher, mentor, or educator would do. Hi, my name is Priyam Baruah, and to put some context on myself, I'm currently a senior in high school, but I've also been a teacher. And throughout the years, I found myself in numerous positions of mentorship and leadership, where I've taught myself and other students numerous different subjects. And these are all students ranging from all different age ranges. But what I've noticed is that no matter what the age of the student is or what subject they're learning, there's always one thing that unites every single learner. And that's the ability to learn well in classrooms that foster an expression of thought, personal relationships, and interactivity. Without these things, a classroom is merely just a room. Education serves as the linkage institution between a student and the real world, where a student can learn to intellectually grow, develop their passion, and build empathy, which is why it's so important that we not only teach to learn, but learn to teach. Over the years, I've developed a simple 3-step formula on how we can reimagine the way we educate. The first thing we need to do is open up our textbooks to Chapter 1 and redefine productivity. Then, we will test ourselves in the concept matter by learning how to transform lessons into real-world applications. And then finally, we will graduate onto the last step, which involves changing the mindset by which how we view education. First things first, redefining productivity in the classrooms. What I've learned is that in order to be productive, you have to not be productive. Now, this sounds counterintuitive, so what exactly do I mean by that? Well, let's say there's a certain route you take to go to work every day, and perhaps it's the most efficient and effective way to get to work and gets you to your destination in the quickest amount of time possible. But what about on days when there's traffic? What about on days when there's construction? Are you still going to take that route? No. You're going to take a new one, even if it deviates from the path you've always been comfortable with. And classrooms work the same exact way. We need to start thinking of classrooms as living, breathing entities which have the ability to be malleable in needed circumstances. So, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, the easiest way to go into any lesson is to create a set of PowerPoint slides and use those PowerPoint slides as an aid to guide you for the rest of the class. And it's great because going into the lesson, you know what to expect since you have this presentation to guide you. But there's a problem with that. And it's that sometimes standalone lectures don't consider the numerous possibilities that might arise when presented in front of a group of live learners. We as humans are dynamic when it comes to being presented with new information, which means it's only inevitable that we ask questions and become curious about new content we learn. After all, how many of us have been in a classroom where a fascinating topic is brought up, which leads to one person raising their hand to ask a question, which leads to another person raising their hand to ask a question, which leads to a third person asking a follow-up question to the questions that came before. And all of a sudden, you've got this invigorating discussion that lights up the entire class, even if it wasn't what was originally planned. And this is why we need to become a little bit more unproductive with our teaching methods. And what this means is adding a little bit of wiggle room for when things don't go according to plan. Now, there's a particular experience that has resonated with me as someone who has been both a student and a teacher. Outside of school, a group of students and I across the Sacramento region are currently managing a nonprofit organization that seeks to teach and present skills relating to presenting and preparing speech and debate cases. And one of the classes that I taught had to do with how to write a basic 5-paragraph speech. And the lesson that I taught for that day was how to write a thesis statement. I now welcome everyone to take a seat in my classroom. The thesis statement is like a roadmap, and it's 1 to 2 sentences that should tell the reader what the speech is about, and the simple formula includes the main point you are trying to deliver, followed by a first, second, and third point of analysis. Now, I'm not going to stand here and read the rest of the slide verbatim like I did with the class that day, mostly because I'm already starting to see a little bit of fidgeting and blank stares on the audience as I did with the students that day. And that is completely fine. That is normal and what is expected. So I decided to do something different and abandon the lecture presentation. And instead, I took this car, detoured, veered off, and took a new route to get to my destination. Instead of going off the lecture presentation slides, I want to connect with everyone in this classroom on a human-to-human level. And so what I want everyone to do is think of their favorite movie of all time. Got it? Now think of 2 to 3 reasons why this movie is in particular is your favorite. And now I want you to join those 2 ideas together into 1 to 2 sentences. My favorite movie is blank because reason 1, reason 2, and reason 3. Without even knowing it, every single person in this audience just created a thesis statement, and we didn't even have to use the presentation to do so. This is exactly what my students went through that day, and it was such a simple yet effective exercise, especially for a group of students who was learning how to write a speech for the first time. And what I learned from this experience is that sometimes we need to be able to deviate away from strict agendas or presentation plans and instead get a reading of the room before any lesson is taught. But there's also another underlying factor we have to zoom into that got the students so engaged to learn. In addition to me following the be productive by not being productive, there was another thing that I did that got the students engaged to learn. And that was the idea that I had asked the students a question that was related to themselves. It was not related to thesis statements, nor was it related to writing, but it was a question relating to what their favorite movie was. And that leads me on to the next part of the formula, creating lessons which have the ability to have real-world applications. With a show of hands, how many of you have been in a classroom and asked yourself, when will I use this information? It's a pretty popular question that most of us asked ourselves before. And I'm here to tell you that is an excellent question to ask yourselves. Because what got the students so engaged to learn in that lesson that day was the fact that they were able to translate lessons from a slide into reality. In other words, they were able to take something that from a lecture and make it relevant to their own lives. And there's a reason behind why this works, and it has to do with something called cognitive structures. Cognitive structures are mental thoughts and processes that we use to find connections and build new patterns within the brain. And the way we can do this is by creating these lessons that give students the opportunity to create and have connections between what they've learned in a class to the real world. So what differentiates an effective from an ineffective lecture is that an effective lecture provides the opportunity necessary for these students to build these very cognitive structures. So how do we do this? And that's where we get into creating these connections. There's a particular scenario that happened a couple of months ago in one of my classes that was the foundation for me to even come up with this idea of these cognitive structures and how they worked. And I'm going to take you to that one day. So I remember going to class one day and I sat down at my desk, and on the whiteboard screen, there was this warm-up question that had nothing to do with what we were learning. Public prom proposals, yay or nay? That was the warm-up question that was asked that day. And might I mind you, this is a question that was asked in my statistics class. Since when do public prompt proposals have to do with finding the mean or the median of a data set? But there was a very clever reason behind why we were even asked this question in the first place. And that's because in statistics, you're given many answer choices. And whatever choices you are given, you can only choose one. And you have to stick with that answer and justify it with the necessary calculations and explanations. But instead of our teacher just simply coming up to the front of the class and telling us, you have to be specific with your answers, or you have to be able to justify them, we instead used these seemingly off-topic questions, such as agreeing with public prompt proposals and justifying why, as a way to connect to a lesson in the classroom. And without even knowing it, us students were building our own cognitive structures at the moment. We took a lesson that was found in our lecture presentation and then applied it to a more extensive concept in our teenage lives. David Foster Wallace, American essayist and novelist, said it the best. Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over what and how you think. And so by creating lessons that not only give students the opportunity to dive into the lesson itself, but give students the freedom to explore and relate, we allow students to become more engaged with what they learn. The last thing we need to do is not a physical change, but rather a change in the way we view how to educate. Currently, most systems across the globe foster what are known as if-then motivating systems, according to Amy Azam, former editor-associate of Educational Leadership. If a student is able to accomplish tasks 1, 2, and 3, then they will receive awards A, B, and C. And these if-then motivating systems are otherwise known as performance-based tasks, where the main goal at hand is to accomplish something which results in a finite endpoint. But there's a problem with this, and it's that these if-then motivating systems can be constrictive to the true potential of a student. What instead we need is a system that favors growth over perfection. Carol Dweck, Stanford psychologist who spearheaded the movement of the growth mindset, has proved that these if-then motivating systems are ineffective when compared to a learning-based task, and this is in contrast to a performance-based task. With learning-based tasks, the main goal at hand is to master a subject through continual improvement rather than hitting perfection with it. Now, I'm not saying that we completely abandon the current educational system we've created up till this date, but that doesn't mean the current system has no room for improvement. The only way that we can reimagine the way we educate is by changing the perspective by which how we educate. Learning is not some sort of short-term idea that exists as a dot on a timeline. It is a long, never-ending journey that lasts us for our entire lives. After all, when are we ever not learning? Fun fact about myself. Writing at one point of time used to be my weakest subject, and public speaking used to be my greatest fear. So to be here tonight and offer this opportunity to present my voice to you, I can certainly tell you I was a little bit of a shock in myself as well. I was a little bit shocked myself about this opportunity. But the reason why I am the student I am today, the reason why I am the individual I am today, has a whole lot to do with the education that I've been surrounded by my entire life. I'm lucky enough to come from a background of mentors, teachers, educators, and leaders who valued being productive by not being productive, who valued the importance of real-world applications, and who valued chasing growth over chasing perfection. And these lessons in turn made me realize that the only thing that stopped me from going out there, voicing who I truly was was the fear that I had developed within. 15 minutes ago, I asked everyone in this room to imagine and reminisce on the first time that you learned how to ride a bike. As someone who has now worn the shoes of both a student and a teacher, I reimagine a future where learners aren't afraid to get on their bikes. As teachers, mentors, educators, and leaders, let us give that push to future generations to continue pedaling. Thank you.